Debra Fileta, welcome to Hey, It's the Luskos. We're so glad you're here.
So good to be here with you guys, face to face, live, hanging out.
I know.
I love it.
Yeah,
So
we've
fun.
been running together for a very, very long time. And it's funny, actually, full circle, I was telling Debra off air, it's so cool to be on a podcast together again because that's how we met.
I know.
Right.
Yeah, all those
The
years
very
ago.
first time we met on a podcast.
Relevant podcast. It was like a relationship episode. Swipe Right had just come out, so that's why I was on it. You're, of course, very into dating and relationship space within the Christian world. And I just remember hearing all the little things you were saying. It was like the therapist being brought on to talk about these things. And it was like, you had great things to say. And I said jokingly, I was like, oh, you're a therapist? I need to get your number. Because I was like, making it as a crack. But then I was like, actually, I really do. Because we had been looking for a new marriage counselor. And right away, we booked time. We started meeting with you. And since then, from then to now, and that was probably 7 years ago.
Yeah.
It's been really, really awesome having your help in our lives and our life, my life personally, your life personally, and us together. So thank you.
It's amazing. It's been such a great journey. And just getting to know you guys and watching the Lord take you to the next level and how you've just guided and led so many people along their own journey of healing from grief and just finding joy and doing what God has called them to do. It's been amazing.
Yeah. Wow. And, in this last, 4 years, I think so many more of us have become aware of our need for dealing with things in our past, dealing with things in our lives. I mean, I'd just be curious from your perspective, is it true there's more mental health issues, or do you think it's just more of an awareness of the same problem that was always there?
That's a hard question. Sometimes I think that there's more because we have more pressure in some ways. Like social media has kind of changed the dynamic. Everyone's on display. There's a new measuring stick.
Right.
Before, if you went through something, your immediate family would know you're going through it. It wouldn't be plastered all over social media and the news. And, so I do feel like there's more pressure in that way. But then I talked to my grandma, for example, and I hear the trauma that she's been through and the situations and the depression. They just didn't know to call it depression.
Yeah, right.
So it's hard to know, like, has there always been this underlying pressure, or is it more intense these days? And I don't know that we'll know the answer to that, but I do believe that the good news is that we're actually starting to acknowledge it and heal it.
Yeah.
Face it, deal with it, and that's so encouraging for me. Part of the reason I even went in, you talked about relationships, it was kind of my passion. It still is. But to be honest, when I started writing a decade ago, there wasn't much of a reception for mental health topics. It's like, okay, you're a counselor. That's awesome. Why don't you talk about relationships and healthy relationships? And that was great. And I even remember being on a radio program where the topic that I wanted to talk about was toxic relationships. And it felt like a little too much for the time. So a decade goes by and times have really changed. People are welcoming this conversation more than ever and embracing their brokenness and their need to heal. And so it's just been so encouraging to watch God work in this subject.
So when you think about the 60s, how different is, I was reading, of course, I'm like obsessed with space nerd stuff. During the early days of NASA, like Buzz Aldrin was talking about how him and his wife needed marriage counseling, but they couldn't go because if NASA found out you were getting counseling, they would think you have a psychotic issue and you'd be scrubbed. And so it was just a thing where you couldn't, and to think about that.
You felt limited.
Who needs counseling more than someone about to get blasted off this planet on a rocket?
I know.
But there was a fear of, if I get counseling, it'll look weak and look bad for my job.
Right.
So it's good that nowadays that's not nearly as much of the case, right?
But even growing up, I feel like it's been only really recent for us in the past maybe 10 years or 15 that it's become a thing of like, oh, this is good. Like in my mind, counseling meant that like growing up, hearing about it or anything, like even my parents talking about it, like, oh, you only really go to counseling if it's really bad or whatever. Like I feel like it's still...
There was a stigma on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely getting better, but we're not there yet.
Sure.
We're definitely not there yet. So.
And there's a tension to it, right? Because the kernel of a truth or the kernel of a lie can both be distorted or grow bigger, right? So you think about like when you hear churches, and I think our church experience growing up was counseling's like fleshly or worldly wisdom,
right?
Like what are they trying to say? Well, maybe there's some streams of counseling or some extremes of counseling,
right?
Where it's like Freudian this or that or the other, and some of these theories aren't going to be compatible with Scripture,
right?
But that doesn't mean all counseling's problematic, right?
Yeah, and even on the other side of the spectrum, counseling doesn't save you. Jesus saves.
Okay, there you go.
Right? So even that extreme, like I am such an advocate of counseling, but I also know that healing starts with the salvation of our soul.
Yeah.
And then from there, we go deeper and deeper and deeper in our level of healing and further. And, and that's where counseling can be such a beautiful part of the story. To me, sanctification and healing are one and the same. Like when God wants to sanctify us and make us more like Him, we're shedding the layers of brokenness and hurt and trauma and pain and negative thinking, and we're revealing Jesus. We're becoming more like Jesus in the process of healing and sanctification. So to me, they just go so well together.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. I think, and there's so much in the Bible about in the multitude of counselors, there's safety and right. And the person who isolates himself seeks his own desire. Like, so, I think it's pretty clear that like you're saying, if we're going to be a Jesus person, we're not looking to like a worldly or human wisdom to save us.
Right.
But these things are tools that God's given to us that can actually help us.
And I think Christians oftentimes, we focus, or maybe I should say we fixate on our spiritual health. I think one of the most profound things for me as a counselor is when the disciples asked Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? And He says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. I'm like, He didn't have to say that. He could have just said, love the Lord your God with everything. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. He was so specific to differentiate the 4 quadrants. Heart is emotional health, soul is spiritual health, mind is mental health, and strength is physical health. Like we have a responsibility to align each of those parts of ourselves with His healing so that we can love Him the way that He wants us to love Him. It kind of opens the door for us. So I just find that to be a really incredible invitation. And I do think that oftentimes the church kind of fixates on spiritual health while neglecting the other components of health.
Totally. Now, why did you get into this? Obviously, God's called you, but was there anything that, like in your upbringing or anything that like made you, I really am interested in this? Or,
looking back, I've always wanted to help people heal. And I thought that would look more like the medical space. I remember in high school, my dad was a doctor and there was doctors in the family, and it was just kind of like, okay, this makes sense for me in my future. But once I got in there and started like shadowing people, I realized I'm way more interested in just talking to the patient. I like all the medicine and the blood and all that stuff just doesn't interest me.
So you did start like
in high school, I went into all these classes and shadowed at the hospital. And I just remember loving the one-to-one conversational piece. Like, let's talk about how you're feeling in all of this. How are you? You're going through a lot, And so I think that was kind of the first step for me in realizing, maybe God has something else for me here. And I just love helping people. And so one thing led to another, and counseling kind of became where I landed in my education.
And what did counseling look like in your upbringing? Did you hear much about it? Was it something that was like that your parents talked about or that they did or anything?
Not even remotely.
Wow.
I think the Western church is kind of behind, but the Eastern church is even more behind. I come from a Middle Eastern background, which is funny because you guys invited me to camp. Like the Israelites camped for 40 years. The Egyptians did not.
Yeah.
But I came to camp.
I'll notice. I'll point out. You came and went from your hotel. You did not camp.
I stayed at my Airbnb.
You popped in,
which is just the way I like it.
We don't camp.
But the Middle Eastern culture, there's none of that. You don't talk about your feelings. The past is in the past. It's even more difficult. There's even more of a stigma. They don't even have a word for counseling, up until probably a few years ago, where they just started kind of piecing some things together. So it's very strange that I do what I do. But you might not know this about me. My grandfather was a traveling evangelist in Egypt in some of the most remote parts, most Muslim parts of Egypt. Wow. And he had a fire of evangelism in him. And I always feel like God gave me that fire as well. And it has opened a lot of doors for me to be able to go into churches as a counselor, or to go into secular places as a counselor, but then to be able to bring the gospel, the evangelical part to it. So I feel like I'm an evangelist in disguise.
Grandpa in you, yeah.
Yeah,
Did
you know him? Did you know him well?
I absolutely did. I mean, I wasn't doing what I'm doing today. And I always wonder what he'd think if he found out, oh, okay, there's another evangelist in the house. Yes.
So
I think he'd be really happy about that.
So proud.
Now let me ask you this: on the positive side,
where
the church is more awake to the reality and the need for mental health, and for these things to be a dialogue and not a taboo issue, and tools to be utilized. What would be the negative side of our culture having just such obsession with therapeutic terms? You know, have you seen any of that?
Definitely. In fact, it kind of annoys me because we're taking concepts out of context and using them to hurt other people. The amount of times I've heard, he's a narcissist, or he's abusive, or she's toxic, or, gaslighting, and all of these terms that we kind of pick up on, and then we start using them in our everyday language. I mean, we all have narcissistic traits. Narcissists are a very small percentage of people who actually have NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. Wow. So I almost feel like if we're not careful, we can start weaponizing some of our knowledge and hurting people with it.
And diagnosing it. Yeah, because we saw a TikTok video or whatever.
Self-diagnosing. And then on the other extreme, I would say outside of Christ, we also have the self-healer movement. All we need to heal is within us. And that scares me as well. Yeah. As far as counseling goes, when you take the Holy Spirit out of the equation, you're left with yourself. And to me, that's a very dangerous place to exist.
I think it is an important question to ask, too. If someone's going to go get counseling, you hear of stories where it's someone's hitting a gong or lighting sage before the counseling services, or you are making yourself vulnerable to open your heart up to a counselor.
Right.
True. So someone listening is hey, how do I make sure that I'm getting counsel from someone who I want to allow to have access to my soul to tinker around a little bit, right?
I think it's very important to be in alignment with someone who is a faith-forward counselor. I call myself a faith-forward counselor. I am primarily a Christian, number one, first and foremost, led by the Holy Spirit. And then I bring in my education to help me, help guide the process of healing. I think it's important that Christian counselors are also trauma-informed. Sometimes we have Christian counselors, but they're not trained. They're trained in the Bible, but they're not necessarily trained in the world of counseling and the practices that come with that, and the trauma and, story work and all the different things that can really help people heal nervous system response, So to kind of take those two and mesh them together is ideal. To find a counselor who is trained, but is also a believer, someone is in alignment. Now, if you're absolutely desperate, can you go see a counselor who is not a Christian for a short while to get some crisis intervention? Yeah, absolutely. Check into an ER, visit a psychiatrist.
They're going to help you figure out your emotions, what you're feeling, and all that. Yeah,
they'll give you a jump start. But when it comes to long-term work, I really suggest working with someone whose faith is in alignment with yours.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's. And is there a website that will keep a You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To go find one in your city or whatever?
There's a few different opportunities. The first would be the Debra Fileta Counselors Network. Okay. I have a team of counselors that I have vetted that I think are just a really good blend of that. But that's all online. So if you're looking for something in person.
And let me just pause and say we have pointed so many people towards this network because we're constantly getting asked, or as we're talking about how much it's meant to us, you're like, oh, how can I get in? And so we do point people, and that's just at DebraFileta.com.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
FILETA.
You got it. Yep. DebraFileta.com. And then 2 other websites. The Focus on the Family, they have a great database of good Christian counselors that they have vetted, as well as the AACC, the American Association of Christian Counselors. They also have a database of counselors who are members and part of that association. Wow. So if you're looking for local, you just type in your zip code and you can find people within a certain mileage and just get plugged in.
Yeah.
But it's funny how much, to me, Zoom's a non-barrier for counseling. I have not found it to be like, oh, I need that. In some ways, it makes it almost a little bit easier to just kind of jump into it in the flow of your daily life.
I've loved it because I can meet with people literally hanging out, couples hanging out in their bedroom. The kids are watching a show.
Yeah.
It's 9 p.m. in the evening, for example, that they otherwise would not have had access to being able to meet because they don't need a sitter, or, the time doesn't work. I've had people Zoom in on their lunch hour, like, hey, I have an hour. So this is their appointment during this 1 hour. So I have found it to be such a blessing. And I also feel like when you're in your comfort zone, oftentimes you feel like you have the upper hand versus when you come into my office and everything is new and different. You don't know what to expect.
Definitely.
So I've definitely found perks, the pros of it. I know some people are still like they would prefer face-to-face, and that's okay too. But I think the key is whatever you prefer, just get plugged in.
Is there any data, I wonder, on like efficacy of counseling in person versus Zoom? Paint's probably still drying to get any of that.
Right. And it probably depends on the type of care, what you're getting, what your situation is, that type of thing.
It's too broad of
But thank God 2020 changed everything in a good way to be able to kind of allow people to meet on Zoom.
Totally.
Would you say business picked up and stayed up? Or, I'm just hard to gauge,
It is hard to gauge. I was solo before, through 2020. So I've been solo for the past decade. And then just last year, what year are we in, 24? So in 2023, I started this, 2022, I think it was actually. So all that to say,
things have scaled.
Things have scaled, and we're busy in a good way.
Would you say the kinds of things, what macro trends would there be to the kinds of things coming out in counseling? Is there any movements or waves to it that you see like, oh, this seems like a repeated theme? I'm seeing more of these sorts of things versus pre-2020. I realize to some degree marriage issues and, whatever, but like, would you say like, oh, I'm seeing themes to what people tend to be dealing with, whether these are leaders or people in the church or, whatever.
Yeah, so it's been interesting because in my counselors network, we're not super traditional in the sense that we're not diagnosing and treating psychopathology. So if we are in a session and somebody seems to have like major depressive disorder, suicidal ideation, bipolar disorder, that would be somebody that we would refer and say, hey, work with somebody local, somebody that's right there, help you to manage your meds and get the treatment that you need for psychopathology. So let's differentiate that first. Then when you see the people that are coming into our network, it's a lot of higher level problems. So we're not dealing with, I need to manage my medications. We're dealing with marriage stuff. We keep triggering each other, parenting stuff, addictions, sexual addictions, porn, affairs, adultery, people who are feeling stuck. And I think part of what makes my network a little bit unique is people are listening to the podcasts or reading the books, and they're motivated. They're the type of people who want to come and heal and learn and grow. Versus when I was in a traditional practice, it was a lot of court-ordered cases, things that, someone who came out of psychiatric hospital, now they're coming in for follow-up care. And I think often that's what we think of when we think of counseling. Like, oh, that's what we're talking about. But we're also talking about this higher level almost like coaching, consulting, like connecting on higher level issues, helping people get unstuck.
Yeah.
And it's just been amazing to watch God work. And I think the thing that has been the most profound for me is seeing how much of our problems in the present are rooted in pain from the past. Those pain points of things that we went through as children, trauma, history, big T trauma, little T trauma that we went through. And it just sort of started making up our belief system about who we are. And then we live out of that. And we get to a point where it's like, this isn't working, right? And so that has been the theme. And maybe it's just the theme because I've made it the theme, but I am just seeing God do so much in healing the present, but also healing from the past. And that has been so beautiful to see in the church at large.
Yeah.
I'm really annoyed by how true that is. Like, I think... I remember when we were on a Zoom call with you after I had my first panic attack. I mean, I think it was the next day. I was so scared. Had never had anything like that happen before. 2020, all the flying, preaching, everything stops. Living out of a suitcase stops. And we're at home for an uninterrupted period of time. And you explained that it was not when soldiers go to war that they get PTSD, it's when they come home. And so now that I was for a prolonged period of time without the normal adrenaline rush of another thing, and just sitting at home, I was feeling the miles from 13 years of, running and gunning and talking to you and working through all that and and through the series of a lot of hard work that followed to figure some of that out. Connecting dots between, like you said, past pain and current problems. And I think I would have, if you would have talked to me 15 years ago, 20 years ago, asked me if any of the issues of my life had to do with stuff when I was 10 or 6 or whatever, I'd be like, please, whatever, I had a good life,
Right.
But it's like, I think I was so irritated to be like, I'm a freaking cliche. I don't, the stereotype of like, well, this happened and that's how I became. It's like, but at the end of the day, it's true.
Yeah.
Right. At the end of the day, it's how we are developed, our developmental history, family of origin, all these things begin to shape us and start to kind of fuel what we believe about ourselves, our belief systems. And then the enemy sneaks in at different pain points and starts downloading things that aren't true, but it's like the most vulnerable moments. It's like, oh, here's a good moment to download this lie. And here's a good moment to tweak that belief system. And we don't always notice that it's happened, and we just start to kind of function out of it. So it is annoying, but it's also freeing. Recently when I was writing Reset, there was a chapter in there that I didn't mean to write, but the Lord was like, you need to write this chapter. It's called Like a Child. And I saw the passage where Jesus says, let the little children come to me. And I, for the first time, saw myself. I saw my 8-year-old self coming to him in this like picture in my mind. It wasn't my kids that he was talking about. It wasn't the kids present. It was me. Like, come to me with your childhood wounds. There's a place for you at my feet.
So
and when we do this work together, then you will grow up into the adult, the Holy Spirit-filled adult, the anointed adult that I have made you to be. But sometimes we get stuck in those childhood places. And Jesus stands outside of time. God sees the 6-year-old version of Levi, the 16-year-old version of Jennie, the 40-year-old version of Levi, the 60-year-old version of Jennie. He sees us in all of those stages of life. And he wants us to heal every single part.
Let the little children come to me.
So beautiful. And that the practical things even in that chapter, Like a Child, is so beautiful because you just give these steps that it's easy to, and I'm just gonna say too, like Reset is just such a good book. I've given it to so many people.
And that book Reset is basically like if someone's not gonna get in for counseling with you, you decided to give like pretty much your best tips, tricks, idea from if you were counseling someone for a year, you channeled that all into one book that for
31 little lessons.
$9.99 they're going to get on Amazon. That, I mean, what would you pay in therapy for a year? I mean,
a lot.
So this is like, obviously best case scenario, people are who need are going to get in counseling, but if not, get reset and start there.
It's a good first
Yes,
step.
it is
It's a good first step. And even to start unpacking some of it on your own, and then you know what to bring in.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to start doing the work on, rummaging through some of this gravel here, and then I'm going to bring it in and say, okay, I think I have a plan. I think I know where this might be coming from. I think I know that there is a pain point here. So it can be a really good first step.
And I love that it's short. Like, it doesn't take long at all. But if you want to, it will take a while because you'll put the work into each little step. But it's like a page and a half of content, and then there's questions. And anyways, it's just so helpful. But I love that. I love the thing of like talking to yourself as a kid, and like in that moment, like, okay, this is what we used to do, but this is what we're going to do now. And you don't have to worry about, like, just that kind of stuff that almost sounds so silly because it's like, I'm talking to my childhood self, but it's this is actually life-changing and will help you deal with things that are in your past to be able to go forward.
And we don't realize how much of that stuff we bring into our present. Like this week here at Fresh Life, I've been talking about sore spots, emotional sore spots, and how we have these wounds from the past that we don't even know are wounds. And then when our spouse says something, that makes us feel like a little inadequate, it pushes on that sore spot. Yeah. But maybe that inadequacy is actually coming from inadequacy from before. Years of inadequacy, years of feeling like I'm not good enough for my dad, I'm not good enough for my mom, I'm not wanted by my mom, rejection wounds. And then now we're face to face with a spouse who, with or without them realizing it, unintentionally pushes up against these sore spots, these triggers in our life. And I think that's why I love marriage counseling. It's two people coming in with sore spots, and they're just getting pushed on back and forth, like your sore spot, then it pushes on my sore spot, and then we're going back and forth, and they feel stuck in this loop, this conflict loop. It's like, okay, let's pause. Let's take you each individually. Let's dig a little bit deeper, figure out what your sore spots are, and start to heal.
Yeah, so good.
So that's Reset. Your new book, though, is Soul Care, and that comes out in September. You've been working on that one. You told me you wrote it in 16 days.
I did.
Which is...
Does that sound like bragging? Because
no, it sounds like you said it was a gift, and it does sound like a gift from God.
It feels to me like a little bit of, you hear about when Rocky Balboa, Sylvester Stallone wrote Rocky. It was like a 16-hour weekend. He just wrote nonstop through day, it was just all. So I picture you like typewriter, like just going for it,
It was exactly that. Yeah. It was exactly that.
So you wrote on a typewriter?
No, except for the typewriter part.
But you went after it in a shorter period. That's shorter for you from any of your other books.
Yeah, 16 days, super short, super fast. I literally sat down and received. It was so good for my soul. Yeah. The book is called Soul Care, and it unpacks the 6 rhythms that Jesus practiced to care for his soul during his time on earth. It's like, why would Jesus need that? Because he was fully God, yet fully man. He understood he had human capacity. And it's like, how can we then think that we don't have human capacity? Yeah. If even Jesus understood his capacity and honored it. 6 ways that he cared for his soul, and how we can do the same.
Because you said out of the 500 human emotions in the scriptures, Jesus modeled 39 of them?
Yeah, 39
is that
are
right?
Expressed through scripture.
So we see him having, which is crazy. Some people are saying, wait, what do you mean 39? There's not 39 emotions. No, there's 500 emotions.
Right.
And we can point to verses that show him
having different emotions
39
all throughout
of them.
Scripture. Yeah, isn't
like
that amazing?
What? Like what would be some of those?
Like joy, sorrow, anguish, hurt, like anger.
Sure.
So he felt so many different things that bubbled up.
Sadness be one of them? Like
sadness.
He cried? Yeah, right. Yeah. Interesting.
And the thing that you need to remember about emotions is that they're not bad and good in and of themselves. They're just a signal.
Sure.
It's like your body's giving you a signal, and God made it that way so that you can pay attention. Pay attention. Yeah. What's going on inside of you? Pay attention. What do you need to focus on? What do you need to heal? What do you need to adjust? What do you need to do differently? Pay attention. And Jesus was so good at recognizing his emotions and then responding to them in a healthy way.
So you're saying you identified 6 unique different things
6 rhythms
Jesus did that would help him regulate those 39 different emotions and choose the right behavior based on the feeling and the thought, right?
Exactly. So, for example, like what's one of the rhythms? To savor life. And there's 3 chapters in that section: celebration, thanksgiving, and being present. One of my favorite verses that stuck out to me when I was writing Soul Care, and this one was for me. You know, you write, savor was the section I wrote for me.
Yeah,
like savor life. There was a season when I asked God, what do you want me to do? And he was like, I just want you to have more fun. Because I'm a doer by nature. I am serious. I'm like, let's get the checklist accomplished. And that was a significant season of my life where God was making me healthier. I want you to have more fun. I want you to enjoy life.
Wow.
So the savor rhythm was really meaningful for me to write. Matthew chapter 13, it says, Jesus left the house and went and sat by the lake, period. I'm like, why did he do that? He just went and sat by the lake for the sheer joy of the lake.
Yeah, right.
And being here in Montana, you guys, for the sheer joy, savoring life.
Yeah.
Because you see God in all of it.
Yeah.
To be present here. Not like, oh, ding, what's going on with my phone? Like to be present and savor life. Now, it went on to say that the crowd saw him, and that's when he gave the parable of the sower next. And he talked about distraction, which I don't think was a coincidence. But why did I never see that verse before? Like the practice of Jesus just leaving the busy house, going to sit by the lake. So it was just observing the life of Jesus through these rhythms of how he cared for himself was so beautiful. And it grew my appreciation of him so much, just how balanced and healthy he was.
Wow.
So things like savor, things like protect, which is one of the rhythms about boundaries. And so each rhythm kind of opens the door to a few chapters about that specific thing and how we can start to kind of mimic that and practice it in our own life.
It's a very unique book. It's
Yeah.
very cool. And what's the subtitle?
Now, that's
putting
a
you on the
good
spot.
question. You're putting me on the spot. Something about avoiding burnout
Yeah.
and unspeakable joy. It's funny because it's not actually a sentence, which is why it's hard to remember. It's a bullet point subtitle. Have you ever seen a bullet point subtitle before?
No, I don't think so. But here's your
so.
cover right here. Let's see if we can get a close up.
Somebody tell me my subtitle.
Okay, so it's
Okay, do you see the bullet points?
Find life-giving rhythms, live restored, avoid burnout,
and discover unspeakable joy.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Okay.
Now,
It's a promise. You're
bullet
making
points.
a promise to
I'm gonna
people.
have to like put a cheat sheet of the bullet points on my hand for future interviews.
It's a good cover. I like your cover. Your little cross in the middle.
Yeah, it's very
I
like
do
paramedic,
too.
but
What
fresh.
color does that look like to you?
It's black.
Olive.
No, it's
the,
not black.
The gold in the center?
No,
dark
the main
green.
color.
Oh, it's
And
not black?
Dark green.
Dark green.
Is it?
See, somebody else thought it was black. I'm like, this could be one of those color things where people see different
I think that's
things.
the thing with Levi though,
Oh.
because there are things that are blue, but he thinks are
We're
black.
going to end up in a counseling session here. That's
It's
a
like
thing
a
with
dark
Levi.
army.
You always,
know.
you
You al-
never get the color right.
We've had this before.
We can break
but that
into
is
a
dark
marriage
green
therapy session
with
right
like
now.
Olive,
Oh, gosh.
olive green, right? Or
We-
gold.
Olive
Deborah,
green.
did we tell you about our fight in Central Park on
gold.
Father's Day?
No, let's hear it.
Oh
let's
my
get
gosh.
into it. I'm
Oh
ready
my
for it, you
gosh.
We
guys.
haven't had a session with you since then. So yeah, we had been running
Jennie's
and
like,
gunning, going and going.
I'm here for it, but it's fresh.
Oh no, it's fine. It was
Fresh
just
life.
It was just so funny. It was Father's Day. We were in a fight. We were in New York City, and we ended up in Central Park, walking around, fighting while walking around.
I
the
imagine Father's Day, the emotions were pretty
park.
high
Oh
this
man,
year.
it was
I can't
my
even
first Father's Day
imagine.
without Dad,
Yeah.
and of course, Father's Day still brings up Lenya stuff, and we had been traveling a lot, and so it was
And all of, like, I was exhausted.
yeah.
It had been 20 days of travel
Yeah.
out of a carry-on suitcase.
Yeah.
I was high emotion. It was just a bad combination.
Well, we handled it. We figured out we walked. Walking, actually, you know what? That's the first time I even remember on a walk fight. I kind of liked it. Like,
Yeah,
I don't
it
want
was
to get in a
better.
fight with you, but like,
It
walking
gives you something to do.
is good.
It
Well, and you're looking
releases
forward.
the stored energy. It really does.
Okay.
When you're
so that's a
walking.
thing.
So one of my chapters in Soul Care is called Walking with Jesus. But it's not just about the figurative, like we're walking with Jesus. It's about the literal,
Like Adam did.
like Adam did. Do you know Jesus took 40,000 steps a day?
Oh my gosh.
If he had an iWatch.
What would Jesus Fitbit? It's like, what would Jesus Whoop?
They have kind of done an analysis based on all the towns he went to.
That's brilliant.
40,000 steps, you guys. Walking is powerful. It's therapeutic. It releases stored energy and cortisol and all of these things that otherwise would stay in. So there's something to what you're saying that's actually psychologically and physiologically accurate.
So if you're in a fight, be like, let's just take this on the road. Let's walk. Plus, you know what else was good about it?
What?
There was witnesses. There was all these
you're
people.
In public.
We had to sort of
can't be that intense because it was intense.
Well, no, I'm saying, but as far as like you end up on YouTube, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
it's so true.
Pastor.
So we ended up sitting on a bench, right? Mm-hmm. And we worked it out. We were both sending and receiving different messages, right? Usual suspects for us.
And it's even harder when the kids are around, right? It's like, were the kids around?
Oh, it's so hard.
Well, they weren't there then.
In this particular fight, there was a moment when I felt like you were weaponizing the kids a little bit against me. And I feel like that's something, and I've done it before too, but that's something we usually have agreed that's like, that's not to enlist the kids to our sides, because that makes them feel uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And I've been guilty just as much as you have of doing that.
Yeah, I think it's when you're, I mean, it was probably the longest and most diverse trip that we've ever taken, and it was amazing.
Oh, this was after you guys went all over.
We had been a bunch of different countries in this.
Yeah, this was like the tail end of a long.
Literally, it was the last day
world tour.
Yeah,
and we hadn't had a fight the whole time.
No, and I think that was one thing that was frustrating for me, was like, this has been such a good trip, and now it's like, and then of all days, like I know he's having a hard time. I'm just like, I feel like I didn't have anything more to give. And we talk about Jesus having boundaries and capacity and knowing when and what to do and how to handle exhaustion and everything. Like, I feel like, and we've talked about this, like, it's hard for me when I feel like I am at that breaking point to say something, because I feel like I'm going to like abandon my kids and my husband. I'm going to, like, if I rest at this point, like, I'm going to miss out on this last day of travel.
It would be better for you too.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
so then, and this is like, what's happened over and over again.
And we just push through, and then it leads down unhealthy territory.
And then the kids are like,
but even though in those moments you feel like I can't because I want to be there, but it's like the version of you that would be there would be better served to rest up so that when you're there, you're there.
Totally.
But
then also the complexity of my hormones and the lack of progesterone in the time that I should have some, but naturally I don't have it. Like it just comes to a head.
Right.
And like you were talking about at our church, like then the volcano just comes out and it takes the path of least resistance.
Exactly.
And just.
Well, and you've been public about it, but like counseling wasn't enough for you. Just praying and going to church and reading about it wasn't enough for you. You literally needed medicine.
Yeah.
You called it a baseline?
Yeah, I remember when we first started talking about this, and
you listed out all the things that, like, okay,
something more. There might be something more going on underneath the surface here, hormonally, chemically, which is so normal for so many women. But knowing this stuff, having an awareness of it, taking the steps to get like there's a good chance that these moments now that you guys have are so much less than they would be.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah. Had these things not been addressed.
And they're fewer and far between.
Yeah.
Which in some ways makes it, when the rogue wave does come that's bigger than the rest, a little disorienting. Because it's like, wait a minute. I didn't realize we were dealing with this for a while. So we have to find our footing back again on us dealing with that. And then those moments, it's so easy for me to wall up.
Yeah.
Because I get angry and hurt. And then it's also like, I didn't want to have to say, I'm sad about my dad, because I figured that was assumed, but it still would be a lot better for me to do that than just to like be frosty, because I was expecting you to realize I was going to be sad about my dad, right? So it's like both of us just saying something and melting through.
And I love how you talk about sore spots, because I feel like that's just so easy to picture, and how you share the story of you getting a bruise and your husband comes to like lovingly hug you, but it hurts. And it's like, that was not his fault.
Right.
He was just pressing on something that had happened.
Right.
And I think that that's exactly what happens, is that the sore spots that we have, we're the closest to each other. So we're always going to press those things.
Exactly.
And I think that even the awareness of that, I feel like is life-changing. And then having that grace to understand. But also, I don't know.
Deborah, when you get in a fight with your husband, how does that work for him?
We never
Fighting
fight.
a counselor. I'm trying to imagine, like,
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? How does
Fighting
that
a
work exactly?
counselor is hard. It is.
Yeah, because you know jujitsu verbally. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like, I know exactly where you're going to
It's
go
like,
with that.
he's no match against me.
He's an ophthalmologist, though, so he knows which eye to poke.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And he
knows.
kind of goes that route,
Yeah,
you
sure.
know, when my jujitsu gets too strong.
I
it's
notice
like,
your eyes are
boing.
dilated. Your adrenaline is...
It's been really interesting, actually, because honestly, it's not like I was born a counselor, right? I've been on a journey of figuring out how to heal myself. And that doesn't mean that I do it perfectly.
Otherwise, every pastor out there would be completely sinless, right?
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So it's a journey for me too. But I will say when it comes to my husband and I's communication, usually he defaults to, okay, like I'm going to trust you and your guidance in this area, just like I trust him. He's so financially savvy with certain parts of our finances.
Wow.
I kind of hand it to him and let him guide and lead the way. And so he's, over the years, become really good at kind of recognizing our pattern, our conflict cycle. And here's what our conflict cycle actually is. It's usually me, the counselor, seeing something that needs to be adjusted or changed or tweaked in our relationship, bringing it up. Hey, I really think we need to work on this, or I really think you need to work on this. And him getting defensive and feeling like defensive.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to receive criticism.
Yeah.
So it's been a journey of me learning how to communicate it in a way that honors him, but him learning how to receive it in a way that honors me and our marriage.
Yeah.
And realizing that we have sore spots from the past
Yeah.
that cause him to be defensive, right?
Yeah.
And I have sore spots from the past that make me feel like I need to call things out ASAP. It's not always the time to talk about things that need to change. So, but it's really good though, because I'm grateful that we're human and that we have fights and arguments and patterns and conflict cycles that we can draw from, learn, and help other people.
Wow.
Like this is just a journey. And I will say I'm grateful that over the years, we've been married for 17 years, the conflicts are resolved so much faster. I won't say that we don't have as many,
Sure.
but they don't last as long.
Yeah.
Like we have learned how to close that circle once it's been fractured and we're feeling disconnected, how to reconnect much faster than we ever did when we were first married, you know?
Yeah,
I
I
feel
feel
like
like
disconnected for who knows how long.
Yeah, like fights would just like simmer and just kind of
and you don't
be,
fully deal with it or fully connect. And then the next thing just makes you feel even more distant from each other. So I feel like we're in a season where, okay, it happened. The rupture happened. Let's deal with it as soon as possible and move on.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite counselor movie? Because there are some actually great counselor movies. What's the one where Robert De Niro gets counseled by Billy Crystal? He's like a mobster, but he's like going to counseling.
Remember, my pop culture knowledge is like zero.
Okay. What is that movie? Google that movie. Mob
She doesn't.
movie.
You don't really watch
Okay,
movies,
Robert-
right?
One
Or-
movie comes to mind that
Patch
I love.
Adams is a counselor movie. That's
That
kind of a
was good.
sad
I liked
ending.
it.
That's very
What about
sad.
Bob?
What about
It's
Bob
so
is a counselor
funny.
movie.
So hilarious and funny.
Counselor to the
and
mob.
frustrating.
What is it? There's like it's like a movie. It's like a famous
Heist?
mobster who's going to counseling every day, and I think Billy Crystal's
That's
his
so
counselor,
funny.
and he's like, I killed 80
that
people
is.
today.
Analyze this.
Analyze this.
Oh, that sounds familiar.
Disclaimer: I don't remember if
We're
it's
not
a clean
saying you
movie or
should
not.
watch it. We're just
It's
saying.
an old movie, but it's a funny premise.
That's really
Here's this
funny.
mobster needing to get some things off his chest, and Billy Crystal's trying to like, kind of what about Bob style,
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that. I've worked with some really tough people from the outside. Like, I won't go into detail about certain things that were in their history or their life that you would be like, whoa. But once you start unpacking, you're like, it's no wonder. It's no wonder you got here. And I feel like that has been huge for me as far as like learning to forgive difficult people is being able to kind of see myself in their story, put myself in their shoes, have empathy for them and their situation, and realize like it's only by the grace of God that I am where I am today. And when you have empathy for people, you can forgive.
Yeah, wow.
It doesn't excuse bad behavior, sin, the things that
Right.
grieve the heart of God. Like there's consequences for this stuff, but the consequence is not me withholding forgiveness. The consequence is between you and the Lord. And there will be a day for that, I guarantee.
Yeah.
But it's also just been really good for me to work with people that you're like, this makes so much sense.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
I'm sure there's like, some amount of counseling sessions that you see where you're like, wow, we hit breakthrough, we hit synergy, we finally start clicking. Is there like a number that comes to your mind of how many times someone going to counseling before you really hit pay dirt? I'm sure there's the person who opens up and starts blubbering first one and it's amazing, but like, is it fourth time, fifth time? Like where do you start really seeing traction with somebody?
I'd say don't give up before 3.
Okay.
Sometimes people go once, twice, 3 times, and they're like, so just keep pushing through. I would say 6 to 8 is the sweet spot.
Okay. Almost a little bit less than monthly then in a year, right?
Well, if to me, I like spacing it out closer. So maybe a couple weeks in a row, then every other week, and then monthly. And then maybe every other month, if it's your first time.
Sure.
And just reserve 6 to 8 times, budget it in.
That's
One thing I
good.
love about our network is we also have reduced rate counseling, and we also have missionary discounts, student discounts. Like when people say it's not affordable, that's not totally accurate.
No, and a lot of insurance plans do cover.
A lot of insurance
towards
covers
it.
copays.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, there's discounted ways like through our network. There's also counseling offices all over the country that offer pro bono or sliding scale. You just have to do a little research.
Yeah.
But
And honestly,
it's-
you're going to get out of it for what you put into it too. So like having some investment in it, you'll take it more seriously.
Right.
That's good, right?
Well, and then if you have to like take it from something else in your budget, like where you're actually like, okay, this is costing
Yeah,
You know what
me.
you should take it out of? The average married
Hulu.
couple. Yeah. But listen, this is even worse. Spends $2,000 a year on mulch.
Mulch?
You know what mulch is? Do you have mulch in Montana?
No.
Do you even know
like
that
with
word?
gardening.
Do you even know the word mulch?
Gardening.
There's rocks everywhere here.
Okay, yeah.
But mulch is like that, the
We do
the,
have mulch
the
in
wood
It's right there.
chips.
It's a photo
Are
of
we
it.
have mulch
Googling
in
it?
our yard.
We have to Google mulch in Montana.
I can assure you, I do not spend $2,000
probably do
dollars
not.
a year on mulch.
You
we
probably
have
do
mulch.
Are you secretly buying mulch?
not. She is. I
Jennie,
know. We're going to have to, part 2 of
We'll have to
counseling.
do an audit on the budget.
But think about that. The average couple is spending more on their landscaping than they are on their personal journey of healing.
That's not good. Yeah, but I mean, if you took HBO Max and Hulu away for a year and just threw that into counseling or whatever,
Right.
anything
Starbucks.
like that, it's going to be good for you. Don't
Yeah.
take away Starbucks.
Well, just get a good coffee machine and then take away
Everyone
Starbucks.
always picks on Starbucks. They're like, you want to support a child through this?
I know, they
world
really
tour?
do.
Stop buying Starbucks. Like, okay, enough with that.
No.
Let's
Here-
buy Starbucks and support a
Do
child.
you like Starbucks coffee that much?
I'm just saying, don't take the coffee budget away.
Oh, he just
find
will never,
another
he doesn't
place.
ever fast from coffee.
Find another place to take your money and do
No,
the missions
here's
work,
the-
but get
Yes,
your
I
coffee
get
Here's
it.
too.
the
I get
edited
it.
version of that.
I just find that
Just
intellectually lazy.
Just drink black
need
coffee
more
because black
options.
coffee is like $1.80 or something.
Not anymore. Starbucks
Well, why
charges
don't
like
you get a
$3
list
for
of
it.
things? Give us some ideas.
Mulch would be at top of the list.
Mulch? People are Googling mulch right now. Like,
Definitely
what was that?
downsize your media consumption.
Eating out?
Take away your fast food budget, or your Uber Eats budget, or
Right.
ride the bird scooter instead of Ubering. Take the subway instead of riding the bird scooter. I'm just saying, like, keep drinking coffee. Let the people drink coffee.
Yeah, they can drink coffee.
I was
I
gonna say
agree
just
with
take
that.
the sugar and cream
Just don't
out,
drink
'cause that's
too
what's so
much.
expensive.
So Starbucks coffee used to be $1.40 for like a tall, always. Then it was like $1.70. I think it's like up to $3 for just a black coffee at Starbucks.
Now
Wow.
you're going against your case.
I know. I'm just saying that is crazy.
you are spending money on
Google
black
that.
coffee.
What is a black coffee at Starbucks? But I do make coffee at home.
Yeah.
I don't go out for coffee, but I'm just saying.
And that's why you can afford counseling.
And supporting missionaries.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you do it all.
Well, we'll take the money from somewhere else. $1.95. I was wrong.
Oh, well, no, that's as
That's
of
2022. I don't
2022.
know.
Okay. We need 2024 numbers.
Let's go to Starbucks right now
Yeah.
and find
see.
out.
Well,
Like,
this
will be
is
a
good tea.
field
I'll
Okay.
trip.
get my
Tia?
sugary
Yeah,
coffee
there you
and
go.
I'll show you that
Caffeinated
that's
tea.
$8.
That's funny.
You've seen a lot of people come to counseling and come out different. You've seen them come in and leave angry, I'm sure, different things. What would be some of the best practices of how to get the most out of it? What would be some things you've noticed in those who thrive in the midst of it coming out the backside?
I think I would start with coming in with the understanding that there's two pieces here, like we talked about earlier. There's the pain point in the present, and there's the pain point from the past. So it's kind of a two-part process, right? Like when you go to the doctor, they're going to tell you how to make you feel better in the moment, but they're also going to help you get to the roots of where this might be coming from. And I don't think people are usually ready for that. So one thing that I have you do in Reset is to map out your timeline. Talk from childhood to today. What are some significant moments that shaped you, that shaped your belief system, that impacted your life? You know, maybe you're struggling with rejection right now and you're like, man, I feel rejected by my friends, by my wife, by my boss, it just feels like I'm not doing anything well. Okay, let's take that theme of rejection and map it out over the years from childhood to today. What are some significant moments where you felt that rejection coming to the surface? And go in prepared to talk through your timeline. I think that can be one of the most significant portions of working with a counselor, is talking through that timeline and allowing them to help you make connections. Could that be from this? Where do you think that's coming from? What belief system stemmed there? What coping mechanism did you start using? And so I would say the pre-work is helpful. And also to realize that you're not just going for an hour and it's like this magic hour. There is a lot of work and investment and thinking through things outside of that hour.
Yeah.
And making the time to think through it. When I first wrote Reset and I'm thinking through what are the 31 practices, where do you begin, right? If you are a counselor and you have to narrow down 31 practices to help people thrive emotionally, where do you start?
Yeah.
The first practice is one that I think throws people off a little. It's to pause. Just stop. Pause. Give your nervous system a break. Slow down. Block out the noise and make space to actually begin to think about healing, to listen to God's voice. And I pull a verse into every counseling practice, and that one is when God says to Job, pause for a moment and listen in the book of Job. And that word isn't like this cute, sweet suggestion. It's like, stop it, stop, cease your striving. It's a command.
It's a be still and know that I'm God, right? Yeah.
It's an intense command. Like you need to stop and pay attention.
Yeah.
And think about our lives and how they're structured today. How much time do we actually have to pause? For those of us who do quiet time in the morning or in the nighttime and have some time to connect with God, but even that can be hard to make time for.
Yeah.
Imagine trying to find space, to create space for healing, for reflection, for insight. You know, the Bible says in Proverbs 20, verse 5, that the purposes of a person's heart are like deep waters, but a person of insight draws out the waters. That's some work.
Yeah.
It's not just like you turn on the faucet and the water comes out. Drawing out waters back in ancient days was a process. Our heart is like deep waters, and we have to be intentional in making space and carving out time to actually do the work and have insight.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we have to begin. It's like, is your life structured in a way that you actually have the time for healing? Or are you just pushing through, next thing, hoping it goes away, and then it doesn't?
Yeah. No, I love how you were talking to our staff about being intentional with your thought life, intentional with strengthening your mind, because you likened it, like you said, it's not like you become a Christian and then all the struggles, all the things like just magically come into place.
Goes normal, blood sugar levels.
When you talked about physically and exercise, like you don't just pray for exercise, you actually have to do it.
Right.
And I think that is so helpful going into what it's going to look like to be emotionally strong. Is it's going to take intentionality and it's going to take work. And I think that how you lay those things out is so helpful. And pausing, like just that simple act of just taking a breath, like even when you're in a fight or when you're trying to deal with your angry kids or whatever, it's like, okay, let's just hold on a second. Let's just take a second. And I feel like that can just change everything when you just pause.
Yes. What do I feel? What do I need? That's a really two good questions to ask in the heat of the moment when you need a pause, what do I feel? What do I need? Like, what's really going on here?
Because a lot of times what you're feeling is not in any way connected really to what you're dealing with in that moment and what you're tempted to go to look to fix it. Like for me, I've had to recognize when I'm in a high triggered, high state of arousal, I tend to like go look at online shopping or look at like I go research something, and it's like has nothing to do with what I'm dealing with,
right?
And it's not going to fix what I'm dealing with. It's just a Band-Aid on it. So like realizing and recognizing by slowing it down, what do I need? What do I want? What am I feeling? And where do I actually want to go? And what is really going to get me there? Because a walk would do a lot better, or a pause than going on YouTube or going on Amazon or whatever.
Right, exactly. And one of the reasons I think, jumping back to soul care, it's a really important conversation is because our culture wires us for self-care. And self-care is not a bad thing, but it only takes you so far. Like that mani-pedi is going to feel good.
No.
But it's just...
Get thee behind me, Satan. Did not like the pedi. She made me do that one time. One time, people. And I did not like... I was giggly. It was very ticklish. I felt
uncomfortable.
But now
I do it, so.
I'm happy to pay for you to go do that.
No. I'm saying I give you a pedicure.
It is better than a stranger. This is TMI. She's like,
washing
she sees me and she's like, I need to do something
like
with
Jesus
those cuticles.
did.
I'm like, okay, because for me, if the nails are cut, that's happy. I the manicure I got one time, I could see no difference on the back end of it.
Really?
I didn't
then that
think.
Was a lazy
I don't know if they did anything.
Manicurist.
Well, I mean, I didn't want to have them be pink or anything.
They're just tamed.
But the mani-pedi doesn't fix
the bubble bath,
the deeper issues.
The scrolling.
Bubble bath feels like it would do something good.
I mean,
it's quiet.
Sure, they're helpful things, right? But they're not long lasting. They're not getting to the roots of what we really need to nourish our souls.
Yeah.
Do counselors go to other counselors to get counseling?
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
Absolutely. I went through a really hard season personally. And I had this supervisor in graduate school he kind of looked like Freud. His name was Dr. Hammond. I hope he's listening because he's amazing. Amazing man. And he was just so gentle, strong, fatherly, wise, and filled with the Spirit. I believe that I am the counselor I am today because of his investment in my life.
Wow.
For sure.
Wow.
For sure. Like the Lord set me up under this brilliant man of God to pour into me. And when I was going through a really hard season, he was the first person I called and the first person I felt comfortable to say, I need help. My body's going crazy. I don't know what's going on. From postpartum hormones to trauma history kind of all bubbled up to the surface. And he was just so helpful in guiding me through and teaching me how to get out the other side. And now I can guide people out the other side. So when we forge this path, other people have the opportunity to follow.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful. I remember when I went through my hardship, this is actually before I wrote Are You Really Okay? I remember being in the middle of a season of significant depression and just feeling so overwhelmed and wanting it to go away. And I remember the Lord gave me a picture of my broken heart, shattered, wide open, getting poured out into a book. And I was like, I don't want this. This is the last thing I want. I could care less about a book right now.
Yeah.
I just want to not feel this.
Yeah.
I just want to be out of this. I don't want to help anybody. I just want to be healed.
Yeah.
Now looking back, I feel totally different. I'm like, thank you, Jesus, that you didn't listen to me, that you allowed me to go through those hard things because I can guide people unlike ever before with the path of healing that the Lord has taken me down. So yeah, I suggest that counselors go to counselors because we cannot be the top of our totem pole.
Yeah, right.
There's a problem if we're at the top,
Yeah, and like I was referencing kind of facetiously, this is why at times pastors end up, making mistakes. They're unwilling because they're looked to for spiritual advice to get it themselves. I would imagine it's the same way with counseling, that you need to also take care of your, issues and that can help you. And I think it is also really like important to remember, like no matter who you are, no matter what you do, you are just a person.
Right.
You're just a person. And you might be used in incredible ways, but you have a breaking point, and it won't be if, but when.
Yeah.
It'll pop out like the volcano of emotion that it is to deal with some of those things.
Right. We're all susceptible. And one thing I said today in the sermon was the idea that when the volcano does come up, let's not be ashamed of it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's embrace it.
Yeah.
Let's be grateful. Thank you, God, that you're revealing this junk in me.
Yes.
Because you're entrusting me to heal. You trust me with this. You want to bring it to my attention so that we can remove it from my life, so we can heal it, so we can go to the next level together.
And in case you didn't hear that, it would have been back in late June, Debra preached at Fresh Life a great message that we will link in the show notes so that you can go back and listen to it if you didn't hear it. So very good talk.
Yes. Well, I don't know if we're going to keep going, but I just wanted to for sure just thank you and honor you, Debra, because you've just been, God has used you so greatly in my life. And you said that a counseling session is not a magic hour, but I honestly feel like it is. I feel like any time that I've been able to spend with you in a counseling session, God always speaks. And I just love how you let the Holy Spirit lead, and it's not flippant or, okay, tell me this, but it's just really you let God lead, and the way God's used you to give me tools and truth, and it's just been life-changing. So I just thank you so much.
That's so nice.
Thank you.
I really second all that. You've helped us, you've helped me, you've helped Jennie individually. And I will say too, there is something special, like, about marriage counseling together, but also uniquely to two healthy people coming together in marriage is better than one.
Yeah, I agree.
Healthy couple. Yeah.
That's the best way to do marriage counseling is to meet together, but to meet apart.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing the work on yourselves so that when you come together, there's less baggage to deal with, versus bringing it all to the session, unpacking it all. It's a lot of baggage to unpack. You're unpacking Levi's baggage, Jennie's baggage, and then marital baggage. That's 3 baggages.
It's a lot of baggage.
It really is. Yeah, it's true.
But if you could just deal with some of that individually and then come in with less baggage, the marriage work is so much easier in that context. And so when I do work with a couple, that's usually my MO. And not only that, you don't ever want to get to a point where you're blaming the marriage. It's like, oh, the marriage, the relationship. No, it's actually me.
Yeah.
So it gives you an opportunity
People
to take ownership.
People do talk about their marriage like it's an inanimate object sometimes. Oh, my marriage is not doing so good.
Exactly.
It's like, no, that's you. You mean you're not doing your job?
Exactly.
I don't know, marriage just is what it is. It's like, no, that's a living organism.
Yeah.
Do you ever fire patients? Do you ever go like, I can't see you anymore. You're not working hard. You don't care. I'm not going to continue to move because it's not productive.
Believe it or not, yes.
Wow.
Interesting.
There's a couple that come to mind.
Yeah.
And I'm like, listen, if you guys are just going to keep coming in here and fighting and not doing anything I've asked you to do, then you're wasting your time.
What if they're just
mine.
creepy and they're making you creeped out?
I haven't had a creepy one.
Do you have
yet.
a high threshold for creepy things? Because people can tell you anything. That's the thing I told Livy. When she went to her first counseling, I was like, Livy, that's awesome. This is someone you tell anything.
So there are limitations. Like if certain things are revealed.
They're abusing someone.
Right.
You have reporting laws, and that should be that way. Right? But like thoughts, and you can't ever tell legally what someone tells you.
Right?
Is that a HIPAA thing or whatever?
Well, I could say it in this context, like without
But you couldn't name their name.
Identifying.
You can never tell anybody else what they said to you in confidentiality.
Correct.
I'm saying that's a safe thing.
Can someone say really weird things? Absolutely. I have heard
fetishes,
some
fantasies,
of the
yuck
weirdest
stuff.
things ever. But so when you talk about my creepy radar, I would have never worded it that way.
Threshold for creepy things.
I have a high tolerance for it.
Have you thought about a book title? The High Tolerance for Creepy Things?
No,
My Life as a Counselor.
I will consider
My Life as a Counselor.
Honestly, I think that's great. That would be so
threshold for
interesting
creepy
to
things.
talk about all the things. You know what's great about it though? There's people that come in and they're like, we hesitate to share this because it's so off, weird, bad, unhealthy, dysfunctional. And then when they share it, I'm like, I've heard worse.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, that's nothing.
I've heard worse.
That's nothing.
That doesn't faze me.
Yeah.
But like for someone, like I told Livy, it's so nice. Like you can tell her anything. You can tell your counselor anything, and just they're gonna not like react like you said. Chances are they've heard something weirder that day.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, you're saying you've never like been like, no, that client made me uncomfortable by their creepiness, so I got rid of them. You just are saying the ones who don't show an effort to change eventually.
It's the work. It's like, are you willing to do the work? And I imagine it would be the same with a personal trainer. If you're coming in, you're like, yeah, let's do this. But then you go home and you're doing everything the opposite. It's like you're wasting your time and mine. You're probably not ready for this.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Come back when you are and we'll hit the ground running.
There you go.
That's good.
Debra Fileta, the new book of soul care. This is available for pre-order now at your website.
Yeah.
Reset is available. Your marriage books. You have a lot of, I won't name them all. There's 7 different books on there. They're all, I'm sure, on your bibliography. What else is new with you? Anything you want to tell our people about? Our Lusketeers listening? Any other new and exciting things?
Well, the fun thing has been rebranding my podcast these days. Yeah. It's called Talk to Me. And it's a hotline style podcast where people call in and we talk counseling stuff. So it's like live on air counseling sessions with people, just talking through some things. And that has been such a joy for me. Just to be able to talk through it. There's sometimes we have notable people come on. I've had a session with you on there.
It's very, very trying to do like counseling on knowing anyone who's going to listen to it.
Trying to like block out the people listening.
Yes.
But it's been really
good thing you have a high tolerance for creepy things.
I know, exactly. No, it was so good to have you. I love being able to talk about things that are a little bit more significant and meaningful and not just, the superficial, but just really going there. And not only that, when we go there with other people, it gives listeners a guide of where to go for themselves.
Right.
I've heard from so many people who are like, oh, that couples counseling session with Ben and Mary, I could really resonate with Ben and his journey and all the stuff from his past.
Wow.
So it helps other people along the journey. And I also think it takes down the stigma. You're like, oh, this isn't that bad. This is what it sounds like and feels like and looks like in a session.
It's like a gateway drug for counseling, getting to listen to someone else's
intimidation.
Yeah. And people like that. People like feeling like they're an insider to someone else's like drama too. It can kind of make them feel a little bit less crazy.
It is entertaining as well as insightful.
And probably helpful to their own process because you tend to like see what other people should do clearer than yourself.
100%. It's true. It's like you have an objective like, oh, it's so clear that that's from their childhood. And it's like, oh, wait.
But connecting your own dots is a little tougher because you have a dog in the hunt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so the podcast is Talk to Me, all the platforms, people can listen to it.
Yeah.
The book comes out in a month, so people can get that. Did you do the audiobook?
I'm working on it right now.
Ooh.
Are you?
I can only do 4 chapters at a time because then my voice starts to get a little crispy.
Yeah.
Do you have that issue at all?
It's hard. Yes. Audiobooks are really hard.
We've done them just like 3 days in a row, 2 days in a row.
Let me tell you, the most tired I've ever been that I can recall is doing Last Supper on the Moon audiobook.
Oh,
that book is 90,000 words.
He even had me do some things to alleviate.
I had her do the application questions and sections because it was so much. But here's the stupid part. I have like in my head, I'm like, I can do it faster than I did last time.
Mm-hmm.
So most audiobooks I do in 2 days.
Okay.
Just knock them out. 8-hour days, bang it out. I said, well, Last Supper on the Moon, I can do it in 3. No problem. And like I was so cocky, I waited till like halfway through the first day to get going. I had meetings and it was kept pushing. So when I finally got into it, I was like, oh, I'm in big trouble. There's hard words, NASA aeronautic stuff.
Right.
Like it's a lot, numbers. And by the end of day 2, I was so depleted. But I had to fly out end of day 3. So there was no
margin.
Thank you.
It's a theme lately.
Unpack this for me, Debra.
We'll have to talk about that next time we meet.
But I got it done. But it was really like to the wire. You know?
But did you feel like your voice was like strained by the end?
I have tips and tricks like from years of preaching. You inhaled my Olbas oil today. You can restore some of your.
I'm good for a year after that. Seriously. That was like the Holy Spirit himself.
Mm-hmm.
Woo.
Yeah. It's for those listening, it's eucalyptus, menthol, and peppermint poured into hot water. You breathe it opens your sinuses, hydrates everything. It's very humid. So before I would begin, I would put my head over a bowl with that for a long time, 15 minutes, and then I would do vocal warm-ups to bring my voice up. So usually when you're getting your voice is getting the signs of wear and tear and hoarse, it's oftentimes because you didn't prepare it for the workout that was coming, like not training for a 10K or whatever.
Right.
So
I never thought about my voice in that way.
It's a muscle. So, vocalists would do warm-ups and their voices get stronger. And, so that's recording an audiobook is a serious workout, so. Well, good luck to you on the recording.
Yes. Well, thank you. I have like 4 more chapters to go.
Okay. Yeah, you said
Almost
4 chapters in a go, but we're excited for that book to come out and we commend everyone to it. But thanks for coming on today.
Thank you, guys. I love you both. I appreciate everything that God is doing in you and through you. And thanks for having me.
Right back at you. All right. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to swing by levilusko.com and jennielusko.com to see what's going on in our world.
And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And in the meantime, we would love to connect with you on social media.
Jennie and Levi Lusko out.